I'm really in love with the Claws series that Dan Mora did with Grant Morrison. Like,
yes,
it's really a fantastic take on the character, fantastic like new universe that they've created there. The artwork is effing phenomenal. Like I can't even imagine like the perspective grids that he did to kind of create some of those huge 2-page spreads. It's just insane.
Really, it looks really, really cool. So I'm glad to hear you say that it's in your top 5. That's pretty awesome. Now, is it finished or is it still going?
What they did was they had like more of a main story that they told through several issues. I think it was like 6 or 7 issues. But then they had smaller kind of stories that were, you know, kind of, I think they were more like 2 to 3 issues long. But you know, they're just sort of separate stories, different chapters that kind of incorporate different winter lore icons, cool. You know, so they do one where he kind of like meets a snowman kind of character. It's almost like a Batman kind of take on a character where like you get to see that character as they are like progressing in their, you know, knowledge and experience, you know, so you can see like the Claws characters actually becoming older as they're progressing. So
that's cool. And then he becomes Santa.
I know it's amazing to like read what they wrote and think, but this guy is Santa.
I know, yeah. It makes Santa so much cooler. Welcome to the Dastardly Dingoes Podcast, a show that celebrates all things nerdy. You'll get an insider's look into the world of comic books, graphic novels, TV and film, gaming and pop culture, as well as the technologies that drive all of it. Now, are you ready to get nerdy? Welcome to the Dastardly Dingoes Podcast, the show about all things nerdy. We discuss nerd news, movies, TV shows, games, comics, and interview the amazing creators who bring it all to life. I'm Brian.
I'm Chad.
Brace yourselves, because we're about to get nerdy. Really quick, that was hilarious. Before the show, I told Chad, like, when you introduce yourself, be a little more energetic. And I was like, don't get all like up in here, just like, I'm Chad. And guess what he did? So there you go. This week's guest, ladies and gentlemen, is just an amalgamation of talent, folks. He is an artist, a writer, a teacher, a philosopher, and a podcaster. He's the writer and colorist of the hit comic book series Feast or Famine, published by Alterna Comics. He's also worked on the Wicked Righteous Genesis series for Alterna and previously self-published a 200-page graphic novel called Atlas Origins about a metaphysical superhero. His exciting and all-new series, which I'm super pumped about, is called Confederate Monster, which combines the lore of Frankenstein with the American Civil War, and that just launched on IndieGoGo. So, ladies and gentlemen, the amazingly talented and fantastically intellectual Dave Swartz.
Thank you for having me, man. This is such a fantastic welcome.
Welcome to the show, buddy. And now, sir, you are being knighted as an honorary dingo, my friend. This is, I mean, update your LinkedIn, this, you know, your business cards. This is serious business. So welcome to the show. How you been? How's 2020 treating you?
Well, 2021.
2020
was pretty rough, but 2021 so far is looking up. So
good.
Yeah, we had a really good day. First 24 hours for the IndieGoGo campaign. We met my goal. I had a secret goal of hitting 1,000 on the first day, and we exceeded it. So
nice.
I was super happy with that, and everything's going well today.
Great.
Checked, you know, we're around 1,700, so doing really well.
That is fantastic, man. And we are going to get into just what this series is about here soon. But first, we do like to kind of get you warmed up. Before your interview, we want to ask some questions that we ask everybody. And the first one is, Dave, what kind of nerd are you?
What kind of nerd am I? You know, I always tell people that I feel sometimes like I'm a bad nerd because I'm not a gamer. I'm not into toys and action figures and collectibles and things like that. I don't collect anything usually. But I've always been into comic books. Comic books are kind of at the core of the foundation of the entertainment that I sort of go after, and those types of stories. And actually, I think the type of nerd I am is more of a story nerd, escapism nerd. I like to dive into a new world, a new universe of characters, and find out what's happening. And it's funny because you would think that would be perfect for gaming, but for some reason, I don't like to take tests. I like to create the tests. So I like to be more like God rather than the minion playing. So.
Yeah, no, there is something about video games versus storytelling. Like, cause I'm similar. Like, I like more of the simple games, like Super Mario or something like that. Something but like the intricate, like in-depth games, I don't dislike them. I get exhausted after a while. I feel like honestly playing them makes me like feel like I should just go write this instead. So yeah, I'm just like in the middle of it. I'm like, I need to go just do my own thing. So
here's the only exception to that though, in my opinion. I play a lot of Call of Duty, but I don't like to play the story mode. I like to play where you're like online because it's different every single time. But the story mode just bores me. And so that's where I agree with you guys. I'd rather just make up a world than, go through something that's already pre-programmed. I already know, it's like, there's no excitement to that. So
yeah, Chad would just rather kill a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And then play a story. That sounds good. Dude, I was that way with GoldenEye. Y'all remember that game?
Oh
my goodness. I would go to like the same level over and over again. I forget, it was like the second or third level. And there was just one thing where if you just go and you hide up in a bunker, just a bunch of soldiers kept coming out and you could just mow them down for hours. and like at one point, my mom walked in and she's like, you have been in here shooting people for like 3 hours. Are you okay? Like, do you need some help? And I was like, no, it's just fun. They're not real. And she's like, well, that's good. Oh man. So I like that. So a story nerd. I think that is the first time somebody said that, but I think that's really good. I might have to steal that.
I like to be an original.
Yeah. Oh, look at you. There you go. You think you fancy. So, so, all right. This is the question that just makes everyone angry. And I love it. What are your top 5 movies of all time?
Oh boy. So, this can go in a lot of different directions, because you have your real, the cream of the crop type movies, your Oscar winners, then you have your kind of guilty pleasures. And, for me, I guess my list is kind of a mix of both, although I would say it's very nerd. So I think at the top of the list for me is probably the original Batman.
Oh,
nice. Yeah, I could watch that movie over and over every day, and it would probably not get any less entertaining for me.
Yes, I know every line to that movie, and it drives my wife crazy because sometimes I'll just say it without the movie even on, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm sorry, I have a problem."
Well, and for me too, sometimes what I like to do is just kind of envision like what would be the other kind of looks for these other classic Batman villains in that world, So that's always kind of a fun story exercise to play around.
Oh yeah, man, I know. Like there was a pitch, and you can find some of the concept art online. There was a pitch to DC. It was Batman '89, and they passed, which makes me bitter and sad and angry. But they did they actually drew I'm blanking on his name, the guy that played Harvey Dent.
Oh yeah,
Billy D. Williams.
Yeah,
they actually did his version of Two-Face on in the style of the '89 Batman, and it looks sick. It looks phenomenal. So I really wish they would have gone somewhere with that book, but
sure.
Yeah. So that's the top of the list, or is that 5? That's the top.
It's the top of the list.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. What's next?
Yeah. So after that, I would probably go the original Jurassic Park.
Good choice.
To me, that just is a all around solid film. It's one of those classic kind of horror genres that sort of reinvented the horror genre in a way. So that to me always sort of stuck out as a unique one. And then after that, I would probably go the original Matrix.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just, I mean, that's one of my, top tier echelon. It's not like a guilty pleasure. Like everyone I think can agree the Matrix film is just.
Oh yeah, that's in my top 5 as well. I absolutely love that movie. It is phenomenal.
For sure. And then I will go probably. See, I'm debating between these two last ones. I'm probably going to go Dark Knight. Notice I picked 2 Batman films.
I am a fan of this, sir.
And then the last one, the original X-Men, because
nice.
I remember specifically that was the first movie, and I don't know if this sounds kind of childish or what, but I remember it being the very first movie that I went to go see by myself without my parents or friends or anybody.
Nice.
So I just remember just driving to go see it and thinking to myself, man, this is the first time I'm just watching a movie by myself in the movie theater. It's kind of weird. But I wanted to watch it again. It was the second time I'd watched it. And I was like, man, I want to go watch it. I want to go do it right now.
Yep.
So I had to make the list if it sticks out of my brain like that.
Yeah, for sure. I know I did. The first time, this sounds super creepy, and it was after I realized, the first movie that I saw by myself, I was definitely an adult and went to see the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because I loved the movie the first time and I went to see it a second time and then realized slowly as I'm getting these weird looks from mothers with children that I am a lone man in a hoodie and basketball shorts sitting in a children's movie, like just soaking it all in. And then, I mean, I just kind of embraced it. Like the one mom like looked at me and I was just like, no, I didn't do that.
Wow.
But no, yeah, like that, there is something I like watching movies in theaters by yourself, especially if literally nobody else shows up. That's happened to me once. It happened. I saw The Spirit in theaters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which is just, it's a fun movie. It's not good, but it's fun. And yeah.
That's also an animated, Disney animated, isn't it? The Spirit?
No, this is a Frank Miller movie. If Disney made one, this is not it.
One about horses or whatever.
I would love to see a Frank Miller Disney movie. Oh my goodness.
That's two cartoon or no. That's 2 children's movies. What's going on here, man?
I don't know, dude. You've got 4 kids. It's okay.
Hey,
children's movies have just taken over your mind.
I will say this, you Brian, you will be very proud of this fact that this is not the first movie I saw by myself, but it's one of the most memorable. I went and saw David Lynch's Lost Highway by myself. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but that one's creepy and scary and mind-bending all at the same time. You would love that movie.
All right. So, I'll have to check it out. I've not seen it, but I'm proud of you.
The reason why I say that, Dave, is because I don't like horror movies or creepy movies or anything like that, whereas Brian does. Mm-hmm. And so we always go back and forth about that. But yeah, just when we were thinking about that, I was like, yeah, I remember going to see that by myself and thinking, why did I do this?
So I sent him one of the pages that I drew, or like a panel that I drew of a demon in one of my memoirs books. And I just sent it to him and he was like, why are we friends?
Yeah.
I don't understand. I'm like, sorry.
Hey, that's what makes it fun.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh man. So that's your top 5, huh? Top 5 movies of all time.
Yep. Absolutely.
Those are good choices. I've recently gone back and thought through my top 5 and I forgot about The Matrix. And when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, we've seen that. My wife and I have seen those movies so many times. So it was a great pick. So
yeah, especially the original.
What's that?
Oh yeah.
Especially the original.
Oh yeah. There's so many good scenes in all 3 of them. The third one wasn't necessarily my favorite, but out of all 3, like there's so many memorable like action sequences and just the story works on so many layers. It's awesome. So either way, let's shift gears just a little bit. And so Dave, tell us your top 5 comics of all time.
All right. So for this,
wait, can I ask you one thing real quick? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So you are both an artist and a writer.
I am.
And I as well. And so with Brian, we're all artists and writers. And as kind of a sequel question to this is, do you appreciate art or writing more when you buy a comic book?
That's a great question. I personally feel as though I gravitate more towards the artwork first. Whenever I'm shopping, I usually shop with my eyes first. But then, I think out of all of the books that I take home from the comic book store, I may only stick with one or two, but that's only because I enjoy the writing.
Right.
So, if I pick something, I'm like, oh, that's a really cool cover, or oh, that's a really cool, interior. I might, dive into it just to check it out to see if the writing's any good. But, most of the time I would say it's only maybe 10 to 20% of the time am I able to find a book where I'm like, oh, wow, like we have a nice pairing of both good writing and, good art. But as far as the top 5 comics of all time, I kind of chose like 5 sort of comic book series ish.
Yeah.
So, I hope that's all right. So,
nope, we can't. We got to stop recording. We can't do it.
Pull the plug.
Yep.
So I don't know if I can really. I don't know if I can necessarily put these in an order of more important than the other, but I guess I'll try. So at the very top of my list, I guess I'm going to go with, and this may sound, this might sound pretty ridiculous, but do you remember the 90s Marvel versus DC crossover?
Yes.
For whatever reason, that's like the very top of my list as a kid. Like I was so into it. I collected all the trading cards. I collected all the variant issues. I had everything. I was super into that crossover series for some reason.
Is that the one where the Joker like yells at Red Skull because he's a Nazi? And Joker's like, I may be a clown prince of crime and blah blah blah, but at least I'm an American and I hate Nazis or something.
I can't say for sure if it is in that one, to be honest with you. It's been so long since I reread that entire series, but it sounds like it would definitely be in that series for sure. I think the best thing that came out of that series was the universe that they created where they fused them together and characters and like, oh man, Darkclaw. Like, come on.
Oh, dude, yes. Like, and they even drew it like I've seen so many like the illustrations have been very like Bruce Timm-ish as well. Like, I loved it.
Yeah, it was super cool.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing to come out of that, that time period where they were playing around with both was the Stan Lee Presents the DC Universe.
Oh yeah,
that one was my favorite because like his take on Batman. The fact that it was like literally a guy that turns into a bat and lives in a cave, like that was cool. It was like essentially Spider-Man, but like his physical features became a like bat-like, and it was terrifying.
For sure.
So,
so after that, I would probably go with let's see. I'm gonna go with the original sort of X-Men series, like the original from the 60s.
Oh, all right.
My uncle, when he got me into comics way back when I was like 6-7 years old, and he had a bunch of these, reprints of the original, X-Men comics. And I think he had probably the first 20 issues or something around there. Oh, wow. So he just lent them to me one day. And I remember sitting and just reading one issue after another, and just I think for a couple hours there I just sort of sat and just read and looked at all these X-Men comics, and I remember that being such a huge, like, profound sort of moment for me, as a kid falling in love with sequential storytelling. So that's definitely on the top of the list. After that, I'm probably going to go with the Kingdom Come series.
Oh yes,
I mean, like Alex Ross, like, come on, like, just can't beat that stuff. So, and then I've got Batman Year One, Frank Miller. Plus, I mean, just the concept of what they did with the character really had never been done before. So I was just enthralled with it the very first time that I read it.
For sure.
I'm not, I guess the artwork is good. I think it complements everything. And I think it is classic in its own way, very much like, what happened or what was done for Watchmen.
Mm-hmm.
But, not necessarily the type of thing that would have grabbed me off of the shelf. It was more the writing for that story that definitely grabbed me as a reader. And then kind of out of left field, because all these other ones are more classic, but this one is just more of a modern favorite for me. I'm really in love with the Claws series that Dan Mora did with Grant Morrison. Like,
yes,
it's really a fantastic take on the character, fantastic like new universe that they've created there. The artwork is effing phenomenal. Like I can't even imagine like the perspective grids that he did to kind of create some of those huge 2-page spreads. It's just insane. So yeah, I think that one for me, the Claw series, sort of combines both writing and art for me, for sure.
Yeah, I really wanted to. That is on my list. I haven't read it yet, but I've been staring at it for a few years. Like this artwork is phenomenal, and I love the premise. And like it looks really, really cool. So I'm glad to hear you say that it's in your top 5. That's pretty awesome. Now, is it finished or is it still going? Yeah,
they pretty much wrapped it up. So basically what they did was they had like more of a main story that they told through several issues. I think it was like 6 or 7 issues, but then they had smaller kind of stories that were, I think they were more like 2 to 3 issues long. But they're just sort of separate stories, different chapters that kind of incorporate different winter lore icons, cool. So they do one where he kind of like meets a snowman kind of character. I can't remember. There's another one where he meets kind of like a Geppetto and Pinocchio kind of characters, cool. Things like that. So yeah, it's just again like kind of it's almost like a Batman kind of take on a character where like you get to see that character as they are like progressing in their, knowledge and experience, so you can see like the Claws characters actually becoming older as they're progressing. So
that's cool. And then he becomes Santa.
I know it's amazing to like read what they wrote and think, but this guy is Santa.
I know. Yeah. It makes Santa so much cooler. Oh man. All right. Well, Dave, tell us a little about your story. How'd you get into creating comics?
Sure. So I started out as a corporate person in the creative, realm. Still, I was in marketing, but I started out as a graphic designer when I kind of got out of college, and the job that I had. It was just a startup company. So, there's a lot of potential for growth. So within a couple of years, I had risen up to creative director, and I was creative director there for a couple of years. And it just, at the time, it was good money, and it was sort of the trajectory that I think a lot of people around me were just like, yeah, that's exactly what you would be doing. Right.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't fun for me. And I hated the clients. I hated a lot of my higher up coworkers. And I didn't really enjoy just like the overall environment.
Yeah.
So I decided that I wanted to make a change. Didn't necessarily know what that was going to be. But if, one of the persons or people that work for me, they said, hey, you draw like all these superhero things all the time. Have you ever thought about having a table at this local Comic-Con near us? And it was like an epiphany moment for me where I had never thought about it before. The thought had never crossed my mind until that moment. I thought, you know what? There's no reason why I can't.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to start with the Atlas story that you mentioned at the beginning of the show. And I fleshed out an 8-page preview of the story and had it printed and went to a local comic book, or I went to a local Comic-Con. And I just so happened to get sat next to Joseph Cooper, who happened to be the artist on Feast or Famine.
Nice.
So it all just sort of like lined up for me in a way. And I followed a lot of those opportunities to where I'm at right now.
That's awesome, man. So when, take us back to little Dave, when did you first fall in love with comics?
Oh man. Like I said, probably about 6-7 years old. My Uncle Joe, he was a really big comic book fan. He was a huge fan of the original Batman and Robin TV series. He grew up on that stuff. So he definitely introduced it to me at an early age, took me to comic book stores all the time and bought me comics. My favorite thing to do, aside from playing with my action figures, was to pick my favorite comic and draw my favorite page from that comic. And just draw it as best that I possibly could. And so I did that for a long time until I decided, hey, I want to really start to learn how to do this. And I self-taught for many years, where I just picked up a bunch of different books, how to draw the Marvel way and a bunch of different other draw along kind of books. And that was kind of my education for a long time, until I got into high school and I decided, I can take all these electives. Why not take an art class?
Yeah.
And that's sort of what propelled me into more of a solid art career as an illustrator. Because I don't just do comics. I'm more of a freelance illustrator. So I do pretty much everything. Like this week, I've worked on logos for a real estate company, a commission illustration for someone's book. So, lots of different things come my way, and it's fun. It makes it more creative.
Yeah. And that's really cool that you get to, essentially use your passion for illustration and art for different ways, and it keeps it fresh too. Yeah. I feel like that helps not get burned out, because you're not just sitting there grueling, doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again.
Right. And I try to keep my side jobs, my freelance jobs, to be rather quick and easy, so that they're not something that's going to take away a lot of time from my personal work, because I really like to try to keep my personal projects, including Confederate Monster, my full-time job. Everything else is more, to me, in my mind, more of a part-time job. It's the stuff that actually is helping me pay the bills. But as far as time goes, I don't have to grind all day long in order to make money. As long as I can pick the ones that are really going to be choice, I can balance my time and my finances in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. Like it frees you up, because I work a 9 to 5 for a security equipment company, and I do tech support during the day. And it's like I get to use a completely different part of my brain. It's like programming, security cameras and all that stuff. It's like a weird, puzzle that I have to solve a bunch of times, and it's a lot of fun. And then I do that, and that helps fund my job. If that, that's kind of how my brain works.
Sure.
And I want to steward this well and be, good at this, and have a great employer who actually super supportive of my comic, which I'm very thankful for. But yeah, it is that mentality of, utilize this to fund the thing you want to do and love and the thing that you're passionate about.
Right. And more importantly, overall, to me, striking a balance between the two.
Yeah.
So was it a difficult transition from going from corporate life, where you have kind of a steady paycheck, going into more freelance work? And what kind of advice would you give to someone that wanted to pursue either drawing comics for themselves or doing freelance work?
Sure. So that's a great question. For me, I would say the transition was difficult. It was challenging in a lot of different ways. One of the major challenges, though, for me was just my overall kind of, pride. Because what I did was, when I decided I wanted to make a decision to move into this new career, I decided that there wasn't any feasible way for me to be able to do all that I wanted to do and accomplish with that first self-published book, if I was going to be working a full-time job 9 to 5. So what I decided was I was going to move in with my folks, and take a couple of years and get back up on my feet. And I was fortunate enough, or I should say I am fortunate enough, that I have parents that are, very, very, very supportive of me. And I, at first it was a big pill to swallow, because I don't think anybody really wants to move back in with their parents, especially being in their late 20s. But at the time, it was something I had to ask myself, this is a viable resource for me. Is the only reason I don't want to do it because of shame or because of some kind of, personal pride? And if that's the case, I don't really necessarily think that's the best way to make a decision, based off of fear that other people are going to think ill of you. So I went ahead and I made that decision. It wound up being a couple more years than I had anticipated, living with them. But I will say it definitely set me up to be able to do what I do now. And as far as I would say advice goes, I would just say don't ever turn down any opportunity, even if you may think it's not necessarily what you want to do. I have had many job opportunities that come my way, and I have said yes to, and the job winds up being really bad. However, it does serve a purpose sometimes, and sometimes other jobs are really great, but they may not pay that well. So again, it's all about a balance and trying to figure out what's best for you at that moment. Sometimes you have to make a decision for yourself because it's your passion. And sometimes you have to make a decision for yourself because you need to eat.
Yeah. So tell us about what you're working on now that you're freelance and you've got some projects out there. So you're working on, or you're doing an IndieGoGo for Confederate Monster.
Yep.
So tell us, if no one's ever heard of it or hasn't read it before, give us kind of your summary about the story and then what inspired you to make this comic.
Sure. So in a nutshell, I think what Ryan said at the beginning of the show is perfect. It's basically Frankenstein meets the Civil War. So I take all the classic Frankenstein characters and we, move them across the ocean to Virginia during the end of the Civil War. So my main character in the story is actually Igor. But in my story, he has reinvented himself, and his new name is Dr. Daniel Schmidt. And he's a reconstructive surgeon who is repairing these broken soldiers who are coming back from the war with their limbs removed. So he's, helping them kind of put their bodies back together, just like Dr. Frankenstein helped him put his body back together. Because my Igor is a little more good looking. He's a little more charming. He's actually much more of a protege of Victor Frankenstein, less of a henchman. So in my story, Igor has reinvented himself. He's living a very happy life in Virginia. And then the Confederacy, a very secret sect of the Confederacy, finds out that he is linked to this story over in Europe. And so they convince him to reanimate their dead soldiers so that they can take over the White House and win the war.
Nice. So was there something about the Frankenstein story in particular that you were attracted to, or why was that the inspiration for this?
Sure. Frankenstein for me has always, I think, been a character like Batman that's just been always in the back of my mind. Ever since I was little, comics and the Universal monsters were sort of hand in hand for me. And Frankenstein was always my favorite. So when I was originally kind of coming up with ideas for what I wanted to do after Atlas, I came up with a couple of different concepts. Feast or Famine was one, and Confederate Monster was another. There were two others. And so I pitched 4 of these stories all at the same time to different publishers, and Feast or Famine was the one that got picked. So Feast or Famine was the one that I just dove into all of my resources for a couple of years. And then after that, I decided, hey, I'm just going to concentrate on freelance work and see what other opportunities are out there. I was doing a lot of storyboarding at the time. I actually storyboarded a movie for Warner Brothers that I hope I can talk about here soon. So anyway, after that, though, it was a similar kind of thing that I discovered with my corporate job, where I was getting kind of burnt out, didn't really like the people I was working for, didn't really like the projects I was working on. So I was like, you know what, I got to follow my passion again and do what I want to do again and do another original story. So I went back into some of the stories that I had pitched originally, and Confederate Monster just leapt out at me, mainly because I've been on a bunch of Comic-Cons over the years, and I always have this little preview booklet that I made when I was pitching the original story. So I have that on the table, and occasionally people will just ask, oh, what's this story all about? And I tell them, well, it's Frankenstein meets the Civil War. And immediately they're like, well, can I buy it? You don't have to tell me anything more. Like, I want to buy this. Is it a comic? Do you have the first issue done? So that was sort of something that was in the back of my mind. So as I'm thinking about all this, I'm thinking, well, that was a story everyone seemed to be really interested in. So let's dive into this story and see what kind of meat is left on this bone. And that's when I started to really, dive into it and add layers upon layers of different, story, aspects that these characters can kind of play off of one another and really try to give the reader something it's really, I think, super deep and layered and lots to dive into. It's not a super surface level story. It's kind of one of the things that I don't really like so much about a lot of the modern superhero stories is a lot of them are just very surface level. There's not a whole lot of like depth to them. And I kind of hate the like world ending sort of, conflict that a lot of them sort of have to deal with. So I wanted to kind of create a story that was a little bit more down to earth, a little bit more familiar because these characters are familiar, but totally fresh, totally new, a complete reinvention.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about something, especially like Frankenstein. You can really get into a lot of issues of like humanity, what it means to be a person, those kind of things. And then when you're talking about like Feast or Famine with sci-fi, there's so much you can do with that as far as really getting in depth of like worldview stuff and philosophy. And then you have a metaphysical superhero, right? So that's a bit of a different take on the superhero genre. So I think one theme I see through all your work is a deep kind of exploration of philosophy. And so I was just wondering, like, how important is that to you in your storytelling? How do you think about worldview? How do you approach writing and creating with philosophy in the background? How does that influence your creative process?
Sure. I would say it is of the utmost importance to what I create, what I write, what I draw. It's, I would say, kind of the biggest thing in my life. Ever since I can remember, really, I've been always very interested in the bigger picture, the bigger questions, the things that I think we really don't have any definitive scientific sort of, idea. We have hypothesis, we have concepts, but it's not a full picture because I don't think we're not necessarily we're working with all the data. I think that from my perspective, I feel like there's a lot of people who are ultra religious and a lot of people are ultra, in the science camp. But I think that the real truth is somewhere in between, just like the real truth within our culture is somewhere in between. We have a lot of these fights back and forth from a cultural perspective. But really, at the end of the day, it's really difficult to have a definitive answer for the question of what is truth, because there are so many different perspectives. There's so many different experiences. Life is just infinitely nuanced that, in my opinion, I just don't think that there is such a thing as definitive truth. But the exciting thing is that there is many different versions of truth, and there are many different exciting versions of truth that we can explore. And that's part of what I'm trying to do with my work, is to take these stories and use them as vehicles to download data into other people's brains, because my whole idea in life is to try to put out as much food for thought as I possibly can. Because the thing that really gets me going, the stuff that really makes, me passionate and fires me up, it is this philosophy stuff, concepts that, try to answer much bigger questions than I think we may be even capable of answering with our puny little brains. So yeah, I would definitely say everything that I do, I'm trying to get at the core of some kind of human condition.
Yeah. I think so many times when people get into conversations about philosophy or religion or things like that, a lot of times the conversation breaks down because they're trying to defend their particular group, or excuse me, instead of seeing it, there's a lot of common ground. Even in disagreement, there's common ground. Like the idea you were mentioning, truth, like no matter what your perspective is, if we're all seeking for it, there's there's points of contact that we can all have instead of arguing over, well, you're right and I'm wrong, and that kind of thing. That
Right.
I think that's where the best stories come from, and the best relationships and interactions. That some of my greatest friends that I've had throughout my life, we don't necessarily agree on things, but the fact that we share that common search for the answer to that question, really is awesome. And I feel that same way with stories. You can read stories from people you may not share the same philosophy with, but you can definitely appreciate the story because of what the questions they're raising or the points that they're trying to make.
And that's the power of story in my mind. And it's funny you kind of put it that way, because when I originally conceived of Atlas, my metaphysical superhero story, that was my original vehicle to kind of translate a lot of this philosophical information that I had been researching and studying for many years. Because a lot of this stuff, when I would talk to other people about it, they would just look at me with blank stare, like I just went right over their head, because I'm talking this crazy, speak. But then I realized that, well, maybe if I were to just take this information and distill it down into just a regular down-to-earth comic book story, maybe some of this information would translate through. And I found that it worked to a certain extent. It didn't I think, transform the world like I thought at the time, but that's the naivete of the young go-getter. But again, it all plays a part in the process. And I think that's what the part of the picture that I'm seeing now in my 5th year, because my birthday was just the other day. So
happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah. But the one thing I am seeing now is, everything in life happens for a reason. And if everything happens for a reason, it means everything is shaping you to become who you ultimately are to become. So I'm not going to have any kind of, animosity for past Dave who may have made bad decisions, because all those decisions are what taught me how to be who I am now. So, in my mind, philosophy and the pursuit of knowledge of self can all kind of be just summed up in just being in the moment, and not being so worried about the future, not being so worried about what you did in the past, but truly having pleasure in the very moment that you find yourself in, even if that moment may not be the best moment, even if you find yourself in the ER or something, that it may not be a great time, but it's still a teachable, or I shouldn't maybe say teachable, but it's a moment where you can, discover something more about yourself than you may not necessarily have found before.
Yeah, I think, I really do believe, and we've touched on this already, but I really do believe that when people who have, something to say, very strong worldviews based in, religion or science or whatever, and they really want to communicate it well, and they communicate it through stories, I think that's where the best storytelling happens. Yeah. No doubt. And so I think that, because we are storytelling creatures, I think that if you want to really, now some people, respond to in mathematic, ways and things like that, depending on who they are and their personalities. But I think at the root of it, everybody is a storyteller. And so to shape culture, to shape, the world, to communicate things that mean a lot to us and that we want other people to know about, the best way to do it is to put it into a story form. Because that's how it's going to be received in the best way. I think that's, I look at my life like that. The biggest moments that have moved me have been in some form or fashion of a story, whether it be a movie or a book or a comic or, a tale that someone was telling me about their day. Those things, that is how we communicate, and that's how we communicate big ideas into kind of like you said, Dave, like, kind of simplify it down a little bit to essentially give it to someone else so they can chew on it in a form that, they hear a story, and then as they're chewing on that story and enjoying that story, they're starting to think about the ideas inside that story and what those ideas actually mean and what they are. And that's really how people start, forming their own opinions and really thinking through these things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's what inspires me whenever I, watch a really amazing movie or television show or read a good comic book or book. If the story is grabbing me, it's usually because I'm learning something more about myself or about the world or about my perspective on the world. And again, we're all constantly sort of evolving and changing and becoming new, better versions of the people that we envision for ourselves. Because in my mind, what we see becomes our reality. What we believe our reality is becomes our reality. And for me, I could say for certain that the last couple of months, I have been manifesting this very reality with this very campaign, and the quality of work that's been, put together for this campaign, I feel like is really paying off. And it's, again, a reflection of what I'm putting out, the energy that I'm putting out. And again, it's being returned to me, and it's fun to see. It's the fun part of life, in my opinion, is being able to have a dream, manifest it, have the intention, put it out there, and allow the universe to be a co-creator in manifesting it in your life. Because in my mind, it's not just about, I want this, I'm going to, concentrate on this, manifesting. It's actually much more about creating it, but then letting it go and allowing the universe to bring it to you. Because if you concentrate on it too hard, it's almost as if you're lacking it. You need it too badly. And the universe may not give it to you at that point because you aren't acting in alignment with it. So in my mind, you need to kind of just calm yourself down a little bit, not be so, dead set on it happening the way you need it to happen, and just allow it to happen the way it's going to happen. So,
and that's a perfect example. Like if you were to write all that down and put that into a textbook versus putting all that into the comic book stories that you're telling, they would be received very differently. And I think none of us looks back at a textbook we got in school and says, man, that textbook really changed my life. I think all of us can point to a story that we've read or heard or thought about that has influenced us and changed and shaped the way we think about the world. So that's the power of story for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The other thing I would love to hear about is your podcast. And so I know we touched on philosophy and how that shapes comics, but you also have a podcast that deals a lot with philosophy and worldview and those kind of things. So just tell us a little bit about what you talk about in the podcast.
Sure. So the podcast is called Higher Consciousness. It's a show that I host, or I should say co-host, with my lovely girlfriend, Elizabeth. And she and I I hope I can say this, we smoke a doobie. And,
Nope, stop recording.
It sounds so old too. Yes, smoke a doobie. No. So we smoke a joint and on the show, during the show, and we talk about whatever subject that we have decided to talk about that day. So we're wrapping up season 2 this week. Actually, I believe tomorrow is our season finale kind of show, our wrap up show. We do like a 2-hour season finale show. But this season, we talked about psychedelics. We talked about astrology. We talked about food. The food one was great. We actually had on a friend of mine who is a celebrity chef who was on Top Chef.
Nice.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, we do sort of 2-part shows. So the first part is just her and I together talking about it, kind of setting it up, and then the second part we bring in a guest to kind of just explain their story and their experience and their perspective. Because everybody, like I said, has a different perspective. Everybody has a different experience. And to me, those are my favorite shows because we get to bring in people that I've never heard their experience or their story before. And you get to kind of hear my reaction to it in the show. And I have fantastical reactions to things. So I love big words. Whenever someone uses a big word, I'm like, ooh, big word.
I don't. Oh, it cracked me up. There was one, you posted it on social media. It was a few months ago. it was like right after or during, you were recording, you had like this whole like buffet laid out for you guys. And it was hilarious. Like, I think you made a video. I giggled the whole time. I was just like, man, they've got the munchies like crazy. This is hilarious.
Here's something I need to understand. Two things. Number one, are you high when you start it, or is it by the end of it that you're high? And does the show get progressively slower as you
No, that's great. So I can confidently say that we're a little high before the show starts. We begin to get more high as we smoke during the show. And then usually by the end of the show, we're pretty damn lit. But honestly, we, for some reason, people have told us, they just keep saying, like, you don't sound that high. You guys need to get like more high, or just like something needs to happen. You need to take an edible or something, because you just don't sound like you're that high. So I don't know what it is, but we seem to be able to make it through the show not too bad. It doesn't seem to slow down that much. However, I will say sometimes we often forget about what we were saying. So typically when that happens, I call it out, and make a little, mark on the invisible chalkboard behind me.
Yeah. Do the guests have to get high as well? Is that part of the show?
They don't have to. We especially in the days of COVID, doing a lot of this stuff remotely, we just sort of say, you don't have to join us. You don't have to if you don't want to. But we certainly encourage it.
Yeah. But probably wouldn't be as fun to them. Yeah.
I think there was only one guest this past season that did not partake. So so far, I think we've been able to convince everybody to join. We actually had an idea, possibly. So the third season, we're going to start doing video for YouTube. And we talked about possibly bringing in someone to be in like a little contact high box window in the corner or something like that. Someone who's a non-smoker. So I don't know. We got a lot of ideas we're toying around with for season 3 at the moment.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's hilarious. It sounds like you guys have a really like good setup and a really fun time. I like when significant others team up like that. I mean, my wife and I, with the comics and everything, we do that stuff together. And she handles a lot of the finances and the business, and I do all the doodles and the writing. And I think it's really cool to see people coming together and joining in on the adventure together. I love to see that. So I think that's a really cool thing you guys are doing.
Yeah, my girlfriend is she's an intuitive mystic. So she a lot of people would recognize that as like tarot reading, but we don't really call it tarot reading in this house. So but no, she's really great. She does a lot of metaphysical work, lots of spiritual work. She's very, very knowledgeable in this kind of stuff. I think we are a pretty good yin and yang. I'm a little more the scientific aspect of philosophy, and she's a little bit more of the magical wizardry, witchy kind of side of it.
Yeah. So with your all's worldview, you pretty much cover all the bases there.
Yeah, it's a fun time during the holidays. So I'll say that.
I bet.
We celebrate lots of pagan holidays. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. Oh man. Well, I'm interested to hear how you answer this question. What would you say has been your greatest obstacle as an indie creator?
Yeah, I would say. And I'm probably not in any unfamiliar territory here. I would say just getting eyes on the work.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that indie people don't really have as clear of a pathway to, is essentially just marketing. Distribution and shipping and all those other hurdles, I think, can be tackled. Yeah. But when it comes to marketing, it costs thousands and thousands of dollars to be able to market a product properly.
Yeah.
And we can cut costs here and there on things, but it's difficult to cut costs on marketing, and it's difficult to really show that you're receiving a good return on your investment too. I come from a marketing world, and it was the biggest argument that we had with all of our clients time and time again, was just trying to convince them that what we were doing was actually a good return on their investment.
Yeah.
And the nature of indie comics too is very difficult to market, because as soon as you get on with the company, now all of a sudden the independent part is kind of taken away a little bit. And now you're subjected to the gatekeepers, just like if you were in a corporate world. So it's very difficult as a independent person to try and put out your brand or your product. Social media helps with that a bit, but you still have an algorithm that you're fighting against, and it's very difficult. Yeah.
And I don't really know for a fact, but I can only imagine that the title Confederate Monster probably isn't helping me very much with the algorithm. But again, I'm a philosophy guy. I'm an energy guy. So from my perspective, everything is energy. So if I put the passion that I have for this behind it, if I create it with that same passion, every single stroke that I make with the pen, every single key I make with the keystroke, to write it, I can't not believe that there's power and energy behind that. And for me, what I'm seeing, and I might be getting ahead of myself with some of these questions, but what I'm seeing is a shift in independent comic books. I'm just seeing, for me, I'm seeing an opportunity for more creators, like us, to be able to create our own little communities, our little, hubs, solid fans, solid, followers, solid supporters, that are going to be there for your crowdfunders, that are going to be there, with your Patreon, to be able to keep supporting you, to be able to keep making this work. It doesn't take millions of people to make a living. You can do it with 1,000 people, but those 1,000 people have to be diehard fans.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the uphill battle for a lot of us indie creators, is galvanizing that kind of advocacy within our fan base.
Yeah. So you've done, essentially you've gone the indie publisher route, and you've kind of, right now, even you're doing, everything kind of on your own. Explore, the differences there, and some of the strengths and weaknesses that you've experienced in both of those processes.
Sure. Everything's got good and bad. It just depends on how you look at it. So when I originally started out, I went the self-publishing route because I think at the time I didn't believe that I was ready yet for publishing. I didn't believe I was ready to go after them just yet. So I wanted to kind of prove I could do it first. So that's the primary reason that motivated me to go self-publishing to start. But then I think it became clear that I wanted the experience. I wanted to see if I could do it really. And so that's what motivated me to start pitching ideas to publishers, to see what would stick. And I was lucky enough to get one idea to stick, because a lot of people just don't even get that opportunity. So I count myself very lucky in that regard. But when you finally get something approved and you get into it, sure, there's lots of creative differences. There's lots of, things that you just have to keep in mind. I know with the Alterna guys, I enjoyed my time with Alterna. I really think that they're doing great work. Out of all of the independent publishers that I looked at when I was pitching, I was most excited about them, aside from, say, like Image, obviously. But I was most excited about them because when I looked at all of the books that were being published by other publishers, it just didn't, they weren't grabbing me. It wasn't, they didn't seem exciting. They seemed kind of amateur. And it just wasn't something that I just felt I wanted to be, part of. Right. Yeah. I wanted to be in a publisher or part of a publishing community that I felt welcomed, right?
Yeah.
Now I will say when I got into that, I think I had a certain vision of how I wanted the book to look, but then there were specific things that I just had to adhere by because Alterna has a very specific way of doing their covers, and a very specific way of printing and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of little hurdles along the way that you kind of have to figure out. And that's part of the collaborative experience. That was a new experience for me. And especially working with another artist on it, because that was the first time I'd ever written a story and handed it off to some other artist and said,
take this and don't destroy it. Yeah.
But I was lucky enough that I got blessed with Joe Cooper, who just is a fantastic artist. I would say I have learned more about drawing and creating sequential stories from him, and just looking at his artwork. He hadn't actually instructed me at all. Just looking at his artwork over and over again for a couple of years. I feel like you can see his work in my work now.
It's so funny that you say that. When you started putting out pages for Confederate Monster, I thought it was the same artist. At first, and then I was like, oh wow, it's okay. So, but you can tell your styles are similar. And it was certain angles and certain line work. You can definitely see the similarities.
Yeah, the one thing he taught me is do not be afraid of black. I for a long time I was just super afraid of just going super hard with the shadows and really punching up the blacks. But then I realized that after looking back at what I did with Atlas and then kind of trying to figure out, where I was falling short, I realized I needed more contrast. I needed more blacks. So that definitely helped out for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I got to also say, like, Peter Samedi, who's, in charge of Alterna, he's such a nice guy. At least he was to me. Like, I mean, I actually ended up getting a rejection letter for memoirs, which that happens. That's a part of the process. But I submitted it to Alterna and he got back to me in like 4 days, which is unheard of. Yeah. Like most publishers won't even bother responding if they're not interested. Right. And he responded and he had good things to say. He said, it just, the thing, like he complimented the art, he complimented the idea, the storytelling. He just said it wasn't, with the method of publishing, like what Alterna does, it's going to end up being like 40 issues, which is not what Alterna does. They do focus on miniseries. And he was really like kind in how he approached that. And so, like I really love Alterna like I did before because the books are great, but I want to support them even more because he was so kind during that process.
Sure. Yeah. My experience with Peter has always been great. Sometimes, we had creative differences. And, it is what it is. But it's I agree with you that it was always a very, cordial conversation. It was always just sort of like, what can I do to make it better? You know what I mean? It's not just, he's not just saying like, it's going to be like this because it's going to be like this. It's going to be like this because X, Y, and Z. He has justification for why he does the things that he does. So,
What advice would you give to indie creators who are trying to pitch to independent publishers? Like, how do you even get in front of them? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So most of the independent publishers that are open and willing to take submissions are pretty open about it on their website. So you just have to do your research, find the right avenues to send it to, because some of these publishing companies, they've got multiple emails. So, don't send it to the press email. Make sure you're sending it to submissions. And again, read through their submission guidelines. That's sort of the biggest mistake I think most newbies do, is you don't actually read what they're looking for, especially when they say, we do not want this, and you give them that. Because that is the first thing that's going to turn them off, even if it's really great art and really great storytelling. But if it's a superhero story and they're not looking to publish superhero stories, done. But other than that, I would just say, again, make sure you're going after a publisher that the story is a good fit for. Don't just blast it out to every publisher you can find, just hoping that one of them is going to pick it. Know the publisher and know what they're looking for. Like I know for instance, Top Shelf, they specifically, Chris Staros over there, I've pitched multiple projects to him, and he comes back with similar type feedback as Peter. However, usually his feedback is pretty straightforward, and his feedback is usually, it's just not really fitting our style.
Yeah.
And when I pressed him over the years about, well, what's your style?
What does it mean?
Yeah,
sir?
The best answer I can get from him is it needs to be heartwarming, family oriented. So like that's sort of their wheelhouse, are those types of stories. They're not going to publish like Confederate Monster. It's just not going to happen, So I would never pitch to them something like that. However, I did pitch him a story that I wrote specifically for that style, and he still turned me down. So
that's so frustrating.
Yeah, I know. Well, especially when he turned me down in like under an hour, and I was like, dude,
man.
Like I've worked 6 months on this, and you shoot me down in 45 minutes. Like what?
Zero, caring about your feelings at all.
No. Yeah, straight up business. No, sorry.
Oh man. So to kind of counter the previous question, what has been your biggest victory as an indie creator? In the vein of Alterna Comics, I would say my biggest victory was when the first issue of Feast or Famine sold out before it went on sale. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How happy were you in that moment when you found that out?
It's funny because I remember exactly where I was. I was out to dinner with my dad. We were just at some like hole in the wall Mexican restaurant up at the bar, just having Mexican beer. And I just remember I looked at my phone and I saw the tweet, and I couldn't believe it. It was one of those things where I was just happy, that the book was going to be coming out in a couple of days, and everything seemed like it was going to be going well, and there was some sort of excitement about the book. And then I heard that, and amazing.
That's great. Oh, that's so cool, man.
So you touched on this a little bit already, but if you could predict, if you could look into crystal ball and think into the future, where do you see indie comics going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so I personally, and again, I could be wrong, but I personally see it as much more of an independent, personal kind of relationship with these creators. So I think that a lot of creators are going to start moving away from the publishing model and start just doing it themselves, because it's incredibly doable to just do it yourself. You don't have to be beholden to the rules of a publisher. You don't have to be beholden to the people that run the publishing company, because the publisher can be great, but they can maybe just hire people that are just not good managers or not good leaders. And that's something that I've experienced many times in my life. So I personally would just love to be my own leader, be my own boss, know exactly what my vision is and be able to execute it in the same fashion without having to compromise. Now, I will say that there may be lots of different new things that come out of that arena, because what I would love to see is a lot more collaboration between independent artists, people that are just putting together books aside from publishers and just crowdfunding them themselves. Maybe I do Confederate Monster all by myself, but maybe Brian and I team up on a book together and we put together a completely new thing that we crowdfund together.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
But that's the kind of synergy and like cross promotion that I think will help to really drive that movement, because it's already happening. A lot of these guys, yes, they've been industry veterans, like EVS and Dan Fraga, like they've been able to achieve mega milestones with their crowdfunders. But I don't think that it's completely, unfeasible for people that haven't had time working for a large publisher. If you've got good work, if the story is solid, if the artwork is solid, and you are a solid person and not insane, then I think that it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Just because I've been in this business for 5 years, and 6 years, going on 6 years now, and that's exactly what I've seen so far. Is we're getting away from the big 2 or 3, and then you've got the little guys down here, where it's just kind of becoming everybody is, this find your tribe movement that has been happening. And everyone seems to just be embracing that. And it's very much, the people that want content are finding these little pockets where creators are able to talk to them and get that more, intimate relational interaction, where it's becoming more community based than just a hierarchy of corporate, pumping out books to people that consume them. Now it is, well, I've been blessed with readers that, I've had a few readers that, when they receive my books and they read through them, like they're sending me messages as they're reading it. And it's like, I think we're going to start seeing more of that stuff, because that's what people crave. We crave community. We want that. And to be able to have that with someone who's creating something that you enjoy, I think is a great thing. So no, I completely agree with you. I think that's the direction that we're heading.
Right. And, in my opinion, I think that is just a recipe for more creative people following their passions and actually living the lives that they want to live. With all due respect, I have too many friends around me that are in 9-to-5 jobs that they hate. They don't, and that hate, that disdain trickles into all the other aspects of their life.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I want to be an example for, that you can do it a different way. It may take a little while. You may have to do things you don't necessarily want to do, but it's doable. It's not impossible.
Yeah. All right. Well, man, we are at the end of our time. We got one question left for you, and this one is a bit of fun. If you could recreate an already established work and give it kind of the Dave Swartz spin, what would it be and why?
Well, as much as I've dreamt about doing a Batman project since I was a little kid, for some reason, I feel like my writing style and my artwork style would mesh really well with the Fantastic Four.
Cool. All right.
Silver Surfer specifically.
There you go. Oh gosh, what a great character.
I love Silver Surfer.
Oh man. Cool.
There's just something about that story that I feel like I would have a lot of fun with.
Oh dude, yeah. I mean, because you got the cosmic. I mean, there's the sky's the limit with literally with that character and just the dynamic. It's such a rich dynamic with the original, Fantastic Four. I am, because I didn't like absolutely hate the original movie. I didn't like, I thought it was fun. It wasn't very great, but it was decent. And I loved the Silver Surfer when they did him in the second movie. But we have really yet to see the full potential on the big screen. And I think when the MCU gets a hold of those characters, I'm excited for what Feige and company they're gonna do with that group.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, absolutely, man, for sure. Well, Chad, you got anything before we end this thing?
No, this was awesome. It's really nice to get to know you, Dave. And I know we mentioned this before, but I look forward to getting your Confederate Monster. And then I also bought your Feast or Famine. I'm really looking forward to reading that. So
awesome. Well, it's been great chatting with you guys. Nice to meet you, Chad. And I'm looking forward to getting you your books as soon as I can.
Awesome.
Absolutely, man. Well, Dave, thanks again for being here. But tell everybody, all the wonderful Dingo viewers out there, where they can find your work, sir.
Sure. So I try to make it pretty easy on people. I have a unique handle that's all over the place. So you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at Dave Swartz Art. Pretty easy to remember.
There you go. All right. And you have an IndieGoGo going right now. It started yesterday.
Yep. I got Confederate Monster on IndieGoGo, started yesterday. It should be going for another, 29 days or so. We got a lot of really fantastic perks. You can even be drawn as an undead soldier in the book if you want to be.
There you go, Chad. Your dream come true.
There it is. That's awesome. That's such a great tier to have. That's amazing.
Yeah, that is great. All right, cool. Well, again, thank you, Dave, for being here. And thank you all for tuning into the Dastardly Dingoes podcast. Remember to hit like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Also, hit that bell to get notified whenever we air a new episode. So, as always, everyone, remember to have fun, be safe, and don't wait for this week to be yours. Make it so. See you next time, everybody.
See ya.